Welcome to today's video, where we'll be diving into a common issue that many Azure developers face. Why their queue-triggered premium plan, Azure Function App, isn't scaling as expected. If you're building serverless applications on Azure, chances are you've encountered this problem at some point. In this video, we'll break down the reasons behind this issue and provide a clear explanation of how to resolve it. As developers, we know how important it is to ensure our applications can scale seamlessly to meet changing demands. But when our queue-triggered function apps fail to scale, it can lead to performance bottlenecks, frustrated users, and a whole lot of debugging headache. By the end of this video, you'll have a solid understanding of what's going on behind the scenes and how to troubleshoot and resolve this issue. So, why doesn't a queue-triggered premium plan Azure Function App scale as expected to answer this question? Let's first understand how Azure functions work. When you create an Azure function, it's essentially a small piece of code that runs in response to a specific trigger. In this case, a message arriving in a queue. When the function app is triggered, Azure creates a new instance of the app to handle the request. But here's the thing, by default, Azure functions are configured to run on a consumption plan, which has some limitations when it comes to scaling. When you upgrade to a premium plan, you'd expect those limitations to disappear. But that's not always the case. The key issue is that queue-triggered function apps use a different scaling mechanism than other types of triggers. When a message arrives in the queue, Azure doesn't automatically scale out the function app instances. Instead, it relies on a separate component called the scale controller to manage scaling. However, the scale controller only kicks in when the queue length exceeds a certain threshold. And even then, it may not always scale out as quickly or aggressively as you'd like. This is where things can get tricky. If your function app is processing messages slowly, the queue will grow, but the scale controller might not be triggered to scale out new instances. To make matters worse, queue-triggered function apps also rely on a mechanism called peaks and valleys to manage scaling. Essentially, this means that Azure will only scale out new instances during periods of high load, and then quickly scale back down when the load decreases. While this helps prevent over-provisioning, it can sometimes lead to slow response times, or even errors. So what are from all this? Firstly, queue-triggered premium plan. Azure function apps use a different scaling mechanism than other types of triggers. Secondly, the scale controller relies on queue length, thresholds, and peaks valleys to manage scaling, which can sometimes lead to slow response times or errors. To resolve these issues, you'll need to carefully configure your function app scaling settings, taking into account factors like message processing time, queue length, and load pattern. You may also want to consider using other types of triggers or implementing custom scaling logic to better manage your app's performance. Thanks for watching today's video. We hope this explanation has helped you understand why your queue-triggered premium plan Azure Function App might not be scaling as expected, and what you can do about it. If you have any questions or comments, please don't hesitate to ask in the section below. Don't forget to like and subscribe for more content on Azure, serverless computing, and cloud development. As always, we'd love to hear from you. What are some common challenges you faced with Azure functions? Have you struggled with scaling issues or encountered other unexpected behavior? Share your stories and tips in the comments below, and let's keep the conversation going.